Howdy, folks. Welcome to Grounded, a Homeland Properties Roundtable podcast, where we discuss land, timber, real estate, and everything in between.
Welcome back to another episode of Homeland Properties podcast, Grounded. We're so excited to be here today with the Texas A&M Forest Service. We've got Chris Ashorn and I'm Angela Smith. I've been with Homeland Properties going on 9 years as an agent, over 7, and I specialize in land and property management.
Hey everybody, I'm Ben Plunkett. I'm with the Texas A&M Forest Service. I'm our district forester out of the Huntsville office. I've been with the Forest Service about 14 years, some of that in the Conroe office for about 5 years, and the Jasper office for 5 years, and now I've been in Huntsville for about 4 years.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Ashorn. I'm a real estate broker with Homeland Properties. I've been with the company a little over 21 years, and my primary focus is rural land sales and investment properties.
Hello everyone, I'm Josh Mizrany with the Texas A&M Forest Service Law Enforcement Department. I'm Assistant Chief of the Law Enforcement Department. Been with the Forest Service 17 years.
Josh, can you give us a brief explanation about what you all do with the Texas A&M Forest Service, not only here in Walker County, but maybe throughout the state?
Yeah, sure. So my role is going to be a little bit different. We're the law enforcement department within the Texas A&M Forest Service. Ben is in another department on the management side and fire side. Our department is under the Office of the Deputy Director. Our chief law enforcement officer falls under his department. We investigate crimes that occur within the timber industry. We also investigate wildland fires to determine if there's a crime that is committed or a violation of that law. We are state peace officers. We're 10 investigators strong throughout the state. And so our duties can range from different things. All right. So mainly we're investigating crimes within the timber industry and wildland fire investigations.
And those crimes include like people stealing timber and such, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Stealing timber, which people do.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Josh actually investigated a timber theft on property that my family owns, along with investigating a fire that broke out on the same property.
Yeah.
So, and Josh, and just to mention, Josh and I are actually we go to the same church together. So
Awesome.
we're
Cool.
we've known each other in various capacities here in Huntsville. Now,
Yeah.
Ben, you are on a different side of the Texas A&M Forest Service than what Josh does. So can you kind of give us an idea of what role you have?
Yeah,
in the
so
service?
the Forest Service is very diverse, first of all. I mean, we do a little bit of everything. So even Josh, being primarily law enforcement, they're very focused, where mine is much more of a broad scale look. But even then, Josh goes out and meets landowners with us. He fights fire with us. He does a little bit of everything. So, I would say that that my job or my division of the agency is broken up into really 3 parts.
Okay.
So we've got just the natural resource management. That's where we assist landowners, whether that's with forest management planning inspections. So I did a planning inspection for you not long ago from the game preserve fire.
Okay.
And just general natural resource management, fielding questions, looking at issues on people's property, connecting them with professionals. That's a big part of my role is, we're generalists, and then somebody may need a little bit more detail. So that's where I may get them in with a private consulting forester, or they may need land investment advice, and I'm going to get them in touch with you guys, or however that works. So a lot of just general consulting and land management. Another part of it is wildfire suppression. So I oversee wildfire operations for the Huntsville area, in our region, which is Region 4 of the Forest Service.
And this is all on the state forest property, right? That you do this work. You help with I guess, mitigating fire opportunities on the state forest property, not the private landowner property.
No. So all the land management stuff would be for private landowners, and of course on our own land.
Okay.
And then wildfire suppression, all pretty much almost always private land.
Okay.
So I would say 99% or more of the fires that we go to are going to be on private land. So if a fire broke out on your property and you call the fire department, and it expands beyond their ability, or maybe they can't access it, they're going to call the Forest Service, and so we would respond with our equipment. So that's a big part. So the Forest Service is really well known for fire. We have statewide jurisdiction over wildfire. It falls under us, and so we have equipment, bulldozers, fire engines, aircraft that we use, and so we ramp up and we scale down. So on a normal day in Huntsville, we're going to have just a couple of bulldozers ready to respond to a fire. If we're having more heightened fire activity, then we'll increase that, and we may have more. We may have helicopters, airplanes, and things like that. So that's a big part of that. When we're having wildfires or any kind of emergency, really, that's priority for us. So that's when we're going to have to slow down on landowner assistance and stuff like that. And the third part of my job, I would say, would be education. So we do a lot of community education and outreach events, landowner workshops, urban forestry workshops, and then we go to schools a lot. Whether that's Smoky Bear or at high school level, teaching a little bit more advanced science, and we do a lot of stuff with the university. So I help the A&M Forestry summer class with their field station over the summer, and I'm with them once a week, and we go out and look at different properties in the field. And
where would that take place if someone were to take that class?
Yep. So their classroom setting is of course on our main campus in College Station.
Okay.
The field setting, we do a lot of it here in Huntsville. We've visited some clients. I've seen Lone Star Forestry on the podcast before, so we visited on some client properties that Lone Star manages. We go to some timber company property and take a look at it, and then we have some other private landowners around Huntsville that we go to, and we'll just practice all variations of forest measurements and any kind of forest management. And we really try to get them just a scope of different management activities and different views of forestry, from private consulting to government work to commercial timber management, timber investment management organizations, things of that nature.
Okay.
So I would say those are really the big three: landowner assistance, wildfire suppression, and then education.
Wonderful. That's amazing.
So when you have a fire that you're responding to, let's say fire breaks out on a person's property, and they know that it's more than what they can handle, they call 911. 911 shows up, or the local fire department shows up. Can you kind of give us an idea of what point they say, look, we can't handle this? Would they have a way to contact you directly? When they call you, where do they call, and how does it get to you?
Yeah, so they would contact our dispatch center. So we have 2 dispatch centers in Texas for the east area, which would basically be east of Interstate 45.
Okay.
We have a centralized dispatch in Lufkin. So that every single local dispatch center, whether it's city or county, has that phone number just on their Rolodex. And so when a fire department or sheriff's department requests us, then they look at that number, they call, and then our dispatch center gets the location of the fire, and then they dispatch the closest resource to that fire. And so our dispatch would reach out to me directly. Every once in a while, you get a phone call, like it might be a landowner that you've worked with, or say a burn manager had a burn that gets out, and they know, like, oh, we need a bulldozer to come with this. And you might get a call directly, and in which case I would just notify our dispatch. And with the fire department, so most of the time, the vast majority, they're going to get the call first. It's a 911 call. They respond to it, and most of the fires they put out, and you never hear about it again.
Right.
They don't have any issues. So usually when they call us, one, I would say when it's very dry, very windy, low humidity, we're more likely to get called. Access issues is another one. So it may not, just because they contact us, doesn't mean that it's just a big, giant fire and we have to have 20 bulldozers and an airplane. A lot of times it's access. So we run a lot of fires in East Texas in general, and most of them aren't severe. So you never hear about them.
Right.
The month of March and April, we were running almost a fire a day, and nobody hears about it. You get the game preserve fires and stuff. You
Right.
hear about it, right?
That stuff makes the news. But,
Yeah.
But y'all
Yeah.
are working every day.
Yeah, and you just never
Yeah.
you never hear about it. And the volunteers are working even more than us,
Yeah.
because they're not calling us to a lot of their fires. So usually there's a ramp up. They'll have an acre or two, and it gets into the woods, and they can't really they can't pull hose that far or something, and then they'll call us because we need to build a little trail or fire break around it to to generate access to it.
So when you say access, you're referring to actually getting to the point of where the fire is, having the equipment to get to where the fire is.
Yep.
Not necessarily, hey, this gate's locked and we can't get in.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
That's
So
right.
that would be the fire starts in the woods and they can't drive. It's too thick to drive their trucks in, or they a lot of times they'll pull a lot of hose off of their truck, but then the fire has gone beyond where they can pull their hose to, and they say, well, time to call the Forest Service. We need a fire break around it,
Yeah.
and we're not going to be able to stop it with water.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
So Josh, talking about fires, at what point does let's say Ben, who might be on the ground, say, you know what, something doesn't look right about this, and maybe we need to have this investigated. Are you notified whenever there is a fire that breaks out, or are you notified when they feel like there's something suspicious here?
So both. We our department is notified when a fire is in that investigator's area.
Okay.
That they whatever region they're in, right? That investigator gets notified. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be there. So when that local responding unit shows up, there's going to be an IC, incident commander, established. They're going to command and control of that fire, right? So our SOPs are they're not sure how the fire started. If it's not common, or it appears that it could be some type of criminal element to it. Fires there, it shouldn't be there. Maybe a violation of the local ordinance, burn ban violation. Maybe it crossed property lines. That's when we're going to be called, right?
Okay.
When it affects the neighbor,
Okay.
right? Then we would be called. Also, if it affects a lot of property owners, if you get a big fire, that there's going to be some, sound answers to.
Right.
That's when
Like,
our-
how did this start?
That's correct.
When did
Yeah.
this start?
Right.
What could have started
That's
it?
right, right.
Those are things that if it's on your property and you burn up, part of your property, okay,
right.
yeah,
That's
well,
right.
thank God it didn't go elsewhere, right?
Right.
But when it starts crossing boundary lines,
That's right.
that's when you know that you're gonna have people asking
That's right.
questions, and you're gonna need to be able to answer those.
That's right. Variety of how wildfires are started, right? Majority of them are human caused.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the trash burning fires, right? And equipment use and things like that.
Yeah.
We do have fires that are started by lightning, power lines, and things like that, but 90% of it's human caused. So,
Even a human element such as trash and
Yeah.
bottles.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a human element to the
Yeah, because
majority
someone
of
can
stuff.
throw a bottle down on the ground,
Yeah.
and if the sun hits it at the right angle,
Yeah.
it can funnel through that glass
Yeah.
and create
That
fire.
seems also
Glass refraction is a cause. That it is a cause. Have I seen it a lot? No.
No.
It's kind of like cigarettes. Cigarettes get blamed for a lot of fires on the side of the road that aren't always cigarettes.
that aren't all the
Yeah.
cigarette.
Right.
Okay.
There has to be a certain formula for weather and fuels,
Mhm.
dryness for a cigarette to start vegetation on fire. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh actually, there was a small fire on our property, and Josh actually located the lightning strike, which I thought was amazing. I
Wow.
was like, he said, I found exactly where it hit, and I was like, how? He goes, oh well, we have this technology that allows us to see where the lightning strikes were, and I found it. I said, man, that's amazing.
Those investigations are, what our specialty is looking through those the fire pattern indicators. So actually how that fire burned, looking at the patterns that are left behind on the vegetation, and then narrowing down that area, general origin area, and then locating that ignition area is what our goal is.
Okay.
So that's all done by observing those fire pattern indicators.
Cool.
Well, speaking on the human element, how can we, landowners and adjacent, how can we avoid these types of fires, especially coming into winter months where it's about to start to get really dry?
Angela, that is a great question.
Yeah.
First of all is educate yourselves, right? I'll say that if anybody that owns property, they're going to could be burning, right? There's debris burning from that vegetation that occurred on that property, right? But fire breaks, establishing fire breaks so that property, if a fire does get out, that it's contained within that fire.
Right.
And then also keeping up with the fuel dryness. The Texas A&M Forest Service, we have a fuels department, right? That collects fuel samples. I think it's twice a month, Ben. Twice a month, and they keep up with the live fuel moisture in the pine fuel in this area and in the oaks. So that's kind of what we use as a threshold to when we know that we're going to start getting that crown fire potential, right? And we keep a hold of that. So when the local county puts on a burn ban, they're looking at that combination of KBDI, which is soil dryness, and then also that fuel dryness, live fuel moisture.
And we go out, so our office, each field office goes out twice a month, the 1st and the 15th. And so we collect those samples here in Huntsville. And we bring them back to the office and we dry them and we calculate the moisture content, and then we enter that into a database. And then we're able to extrapolate, wildfire danger and stuff from that data. But I would, I feel like it's important to say too, that carelessness does cause a lot of wildfires, right? And a lot of it is just a lack of awareness. So you need more education of, checking trailer bearings, trailer chains, making sure you're not parking in dry grass, but sometimes people are doing things right and it still just happens, especially with like equipment use fires, somebody could just be out mowing a pasture, whatever, hay bale catches on fire. And so there are human caused wildfires that are just purely accidental, non-intentional, not even careless or reckless. I think it's important to say that, but unfortunately there's also a lot of careless, reckless, uneducated causes.
Distracted. A lot of distractions. Yeah.
Just so I'm clear and understand, y'all literally will go out to an area and collect whatever debris may be on the ground from the trees and then or that has grown and then maybe dried, and then evaluate that material to determine the risk of how flammable that fuel on the ground is.
Yeah, so we've got it. Fire is really a science. It's an art and a science, but we're very good at the science part of where we know. So we have what we call critical thresholds. So when we know when we have a wind, so in East Texas it's somewhere north of 15 miles an hour, a humidity down into the 30, and I'm just rounding off. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but humidity is around 30%. Wind, up near the 20s. Those are critical thresholds for weather. And then we have critical fuel thresholds. So each one is going to be, for 7 grams of fuel moisture for our 10-hour fuels, which is going to be like small, fine twigs, and it might be 15% fuel moisture for 100-hour, which is going to be a little bit larger size twigs and branches. So we're so that's going to be our dead fuels, right? So we know the litter and stuff that's on the ground. We know, all right, if we start having in these ranges, once we get down to like the 3rd, or the 97th percentile, like we're pretty dry, we're going to have some extreme fires, but then we collect live fuel moisture. So the live fuel moisture is what we do in our office twice a month. And so we'll go out and we'll pick green leaves off of a tree, and we'll fill a bag up with them and we'll bring them back to the office, and we have an oven that cooks it. So we'll weigh it beforehand, and then we'll cook the moisture out of it, and then we'll weigh it after, and we're able to calculate the amount of moisture that was in that plant. And then we correlate that with our critical threshold, so we know what, if we're in the green or the blue, like we're probably okay. If we get down to the yellow red and or the yellow orange and then the red, we know we're probably going to start having a little more.
Be prepared.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much science that goes into it, and just factoring in weather patterns, fuel dryness, there's a lot, but we're able to really monitor it. We have so many different departments throughout the agency that specialize in different things and monitor, and we know when these things piece together, then we can increase our preparedness.
Now, Josh, you're on the law enforcement side.
That's right.
So, for those of us that may not have even realized that Texas A&M Forest Service had a law enforcement side, can you kind of give us an idea of, when you, let's say, timber theft, when you're dealing with can you give us an example of what you might deal with in a timber theft situation?
Yeah, Chris. So that could be a variety of different complaints that come in, right? It could start off with a call into our timber theft hotline, right? So if somebody Googles timber theft, it's going to come up, timber theft hotline,
Okay.
Texas.
Yeah.
They can call and make a complaint. And ranging from they don't feel like they got enough money to somebody cut their timber without them knowing about it, right?
Okay, and so when you say they didn't get enough money, that means that they hired a logger
Correct.
to come in and cut a certain area of timber,
Correct.
and they feel like that the amount that they got paid was less than what they felt like they had coming, or
That's right. And so we vet those complaints by, a bad deal is not necessarily a crime, right?
Right.
So but there's red flags that go with it.
Okay.
Right. So if a landowner calls me and says, hey, I don't know if I got enough money because I didn't get the correct documentation, which is required by law now.
Mm-hmm.
House Bill 1772 made that available to landowners. So say they didn't get the scale tickets or a proof documentation of what was actually cut,
Right.
which is required now by law on a pay-as-cut sale. That's a red flag for us, right? Because it's a violation, one.
right.
Or if they didn't have a bill of sale, which when you buy or sell timber in the state of Texas, you have to have a bill of sale contract.
Okay.
There's no
Okay.
handshake deals. And I'll just tell the folks at home, if somebody says you need a handshake deal with timber, you don't do it.
Don't do it.
I'll just go on my soapbox here. A lot of folks get an education in the timber industry and they don't get to revisit, right? Because they're only going to cut timber. Most people in the state of Texas are going to only cut timber once or twice in their lifetime. Right?
Okay.
Right.
So if they do it wrong, they'll remember it, but it leaves a bad taste in the industry, right? And so I'll tell you that 99% of the folks in this industry are salt of the earth folks. They're good folks, right? Just like anything else, there may be some bad, right? It's our job to pick those out, right? But as far as each timber theft investigation is different. It can be a fraud case where there's some manipulation with the documents that they were provided, which
Okay.
we've seen that, right?
Mhm.
Which may have listed some, of the products different than what they actually were. Skimming of loads, where they took more than what they were supposed to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so all of this can be prevented, but opportunity can be reduced, right? So when we look at fraud or timber fraud, we look at it as a triangle, right? So part of that triangle, you have the pressure of that person to commit the fraud, the rationalization to commit the fraud, and then you have the opportunity. What our job is to reduce that opportunity by educating landowners.
Okay.
Right? We
Right.
want to reduce that opportunity.
Have you ever had an instance where somebody hadn't gone out to their property in a long time, and for whatever reason they decided to go out and take a look? Say it's been years since they've been out there, and they go out there and they say, "Where are all my trees?"
Yes, we have. We've had that exact same scenario on more than one occasion too.
Wow.
So that's another thing as far as prevention is visiting the property or have somebody
Yeah.
visit the property for you. But definitely that has occurred. Sometimes it's a mistake. Sometimes it's actually nefarious activity that went on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had situations where maybe there was a landowner that had an agreement with a logging service to cut timber on a certain tract of land, and unbeknownst to them, they got over on an adjoining property owner because maybe there was not a clear boundary.
Correct. That's right.
No, that's and actually, it happens. It's an usually by way of accident, right?
Right.
Where because of boundary lines aren't marked,
Yeah.
which this can be prevented by
Marking boundary lines.
with purple paint.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the state of Texas sees purple paint as no trespassing in a boundary mark. It's just like
Right.
a fence, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this can be prevented through purple paint. If there is purple paint there and there was a cross, well, then we've got some more questions to ask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you can definitely see that there's a well-established boundary line, and then all of a sudden there's a gap in that boundary line
Yeah, that's right.
with a bunch of stumps,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
somebody messed up.
Yep, that's right. That's right. The timber industry is one of those. It's something that not everybody fully understands. Sometimes, like I said before, people that get the education, it's because they made a mistake or trusted somebody they
Right.
that's on a handshake deal, right? And I always say no handshake deals. There should be a red flag if somebody approaches you about your timber or wanting to buy your timber and putting more pressure on you to sign a contract. There needs to be some evaluation and looking at that contract. Also, if you don't know, reach out. Get a consultant.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
Makes a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah, get somebody that's educated in the industry that can help you. Contact the Forest Service. Ask some questions. I heard a quote that frustration begins where knowledge ends.
Yes.
Right? And so I think too many people get frustrated and then they get the knowledge.
So
Yeah.
if someone wanted to contact the Texas A&M Forest Service Law Enforcement Division,
Mm-hmm.
do you all have offices that are, I guess, strategic around the state of Texas, or at least they're in the heavy timber areas?
Yes. So the majority of our investigators are in East Texas.
Okay.
We do have one investigator that's west of I-35, but the majority of them are in East Texas.
Yeah.
And for
Wow.
that reason, because of the timber industry.
Okay.
From southeast Texas all the way up to northeast Texas.
And they could call the Forest Service Police Department or police service and either schedule a time to visit with you on the phone,
You bet.
or one of your
You bet.
agents.
We would rather talk to the landowners prior to their harvesting than after.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
just tell you that. It's so giving them that knowledge and helping them through that process. Much rather talk with them before than after.
Awesome.
Good deal. Now, being on the more of the management of the land side, what do you all have offices that are located throughout the state as far as where you keep your equipment in case you all are needed for Forest Service, and how are those spread throughout the state?
Yeah. So the Forest Service, we're very heavily concentrated in East Texas. Now, we are a statewide agency. We have offices all the way down to Edinburgh, on the very southern tip. We have an office in Amarillo on the northern tip. We have people in El Paso, Fort Stockton, Alpine. So we're well represented across the state. With that being said, out there, say west of 45, our offices are probably a couple of hours, 3 hours apart, maybe at the furthest. And here in East Texas, generally you're going to have an office within about an hour of each other. So I would say that's probably the furthest distance. So like I'm in Huntsville. Our nearest office to the south is Conroe, so 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then to the east it's Livingston. To the north we've got Crockett. So roughly every 45 miles or so in East Texas, you're going to have an office that covers anywhere from 1 to 3 counties or so.
We've been talking about your, all your experience and all the knowledge that you've been pouring into us right now. What got to this point? What brought you to this point? What was the interest to become a member of Forestry Service?
So for me, my family owns some land, or still owns some land, but I grew up. My grandpa cut a lot of timber, and we did just a lot of things, a little bit of farming, and I wanted to work in something that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
For me, I think that was the biggest one. My parents went to work every day and they came back stressed, and I didn't want to be like that. And so I just tried to find something. And so I actually read a book because when I graduated high school, the internet, that was kicking off, and so I had a book that was careers, or the top 50 careers for career happiness, and forestry was number 2 in that book, actually.
Oh, cool.
And so I read that, and I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna, I've grown up, I've cut some timber. My family did a lot of burning and stuff, when I was a kid, and so I thought, all right, I'll do that. So I went to A&M, and when I'm a freshman there, a lot of my background is in farm work, metal fabrication, equipment repair, and there's a job that comes open with the Forest Service. And it just seemed like something I'd be interested in. It's helping out in the shops. I worked on our dozers, did a lot of just welding and metal work. And to me, at the time, it was really just something to pass the time. I kind of envisioned myself as I wanted to go work, in the private sector, and then I took a job just to make a little bit of money, and then I loved it. We have great people here in the agency, and it's been really good to me. And so I did that for a while, and then I graduated and I had my forestry degree, and they said, well, we want you to stay. And so they promoted me to a forester,
Awesome.
and they gave me a little more money, and that encouraged me, and then another promotion and a little more. And so I just really enjoyed it. To me, it truthfully was just something to do when I first came here, just a way to pass the time and maybe make a little bit of money, and then I just loved it.
Wow. Yeah.
I got introduced. I grew up here in Huntsville,
Okay.
and I got introduced to forestry by David and Susan Baggett, and I lived across the road from them, and they seemed like they really loved their job. And as a young boy, I'd go over there, visit, right, across the road, play with their kids, and they seemed like they really loved their job, and then later on, it wasn't until a few years later, I found out what foresters do. Knew I wanted to go work for the Forest Service.
Yeah.
I wanted to go work outside. I was a kind of rambunctious kid, wasn't the study type, and so I knew I wanted to work in the woods. Got the opportunity 17 years ago, and Forest Service allowed me to come work with them, and then it's been a blessing since. Worked in different capacities. I started out in the district working for like Ben, a district forester. There I went out, fought fire, been out of state, been on the hand crew, was able to at one time I was a certified arborist, and then kind of led me here to the investigative side of the things, right? And and recently was promoted in December to assistant chief of the law enforcement.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Wonderful.
But I kind of always knew that I wanted to work outside. There was that, and be a kind of a shepherd of the land, I guess I could see it. And that's the kind of way we see ourselves. So
Yeah.
So another thing, I should have told this earlier. Another thing for me is when I was a kid. So my neighbor worked for the Forest Service, and when I was a kid, Smokey Bear, I was in the first grade, and Smokey Bear came and he visited my school.
Yeah.
And I punched him, just right in the stomach. And it was my neighbor in the suit, and so he comes home and he tells my dad, and my dad brings me over, makes me apologize, and I knew right then I got to make amends for it, So I had to come. My first or second grade sins. I've got to come, up to the Forest Service and make it back up to Smokey. So that's a big one too.
Yeah, the one thing that the Ben said is there's a lot of great people working for the Forest Service. That's the one thing. People aren't at this agency for money. You're not going to find that, but it's a great culture environment. People here genuinely love their jobs, and they love the service part of it. They love being that service to the citizens of the state of Texas, and they take pride in that. So.
Yeah. To continue on that thought of conservation and caring for our land and pouring in near selfless attributes how do you see our forests in the next 10 or 20 years on the current trajectory, or do you have any thoughts on how we can protect our land more so in the coming generations?
Yeah, so I think I can take a crack at this. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing, there's sometimes a misconception that there's that forest resources are being depleted, and that's not true. Matter of fact, there's more forest now than there was 100 years ago.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Fact check me on that. Anyway, so and there's also more landowners
Okay.
that have more different forest goals, right? So I think that is going to be a challenge. You don't have these large landowners that have, you know, similar forestry goals.
Right.
Some folks are interested in wildlife, while their neighbor, which is, you know, maybe a 10-acre tract next to them, may want to grow timber, right? So I think depending on how you're asking as far as the resource itself or the industry, timber industry, it's hard to say for me. I don't know. I think the good thing is that we have a renewable resource in timber and in forest, the trees, and we need to utilize that.
And I think to supplement what Josh said, we've also got good people tackling the problem in the private sector and in the public sector, and in the non-government too. We've got great consultants throughout the state that really do a good job of managing property. We've got, you know, large timber companies, timber investment management organizations that do a great job of managing their land for sustainability. And then we've got, you know, a great agency in the Forest Service that helps people and does a lot of research to get out. And then the non-government, like Texas Forestry Association, that lobbies and understands the problem from all sides of it, from the landowner, from the consultant, from the commercial timber company, from the logger. And you've got all of these people that are usually at the table together, and they want what's best for the resource. So I would say, you know, who knows what it would bring. There's issues, right? Land fragmentation is one, you know, a big one that we're facing, particularly here in Huntsville. Right. You know, but we've got the right people at the table, I think, to tackle that. And it's really one thing about forestry is it's a really tight knit community. You've got people now. We don't always agree, you know, but you've got people that all want the same end result, and I think that's you know, that we're in a good place for that.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, if they're in the forest industry, whether it's private or public, they have a innate self-service, I guess I'm saying. You know, there's that shepherd of the land is like a, you know, one that wants to take care of.
Yeah.
Do you guys see any threats that that the forests are could be dealing with, such as pests, urban expansion, climate, right? So is that something that you guys can maybe touch on, you know, going forward for property owners and the public lands, that maybe y'all's agency has discussed and thought about, you know, here for the next 10, 20, 50 years? Yeah,
so you know, I'll take the climate and pest part of that first. And I'm probably not, you know, the most qualified guy to comment on climate change, right? So we'll avoid opinions, but you know, I think in my tenure here, we've noticed dry periods that were a little drier and a little hotter, and wet periods that were maybe a little wetter and a little cooler. So seems like we're seeing more of the extremes. Yeah. But with climate change, that's data that we need for hundreds of years, you know, or decades at least, not just, you know, the last 20 years or so. And that data is stacking up over time, but it could also correct itself and return to normal. So that's my comment on that. But one thing that I have noticed with those extremes is that's when I see insects really coming into play, or these diseases like hypoxylon canker, Ips beetle. So and I'll just use the last 5 years. So in 2021, we had a severe snowstorm in Walker County. Well, our plants here aren't used to being snowed on. You know, they're not used to 0-degree temperatures for 3 or 4 days. And
Neither were the humans.
And neither were the humans, yeah. And so, we get that. So that's a major stressing event. And immediately after that, I've seen, so we had ambrosia beetle. We had several cases, 6 cases of ambrosia beetle in, in this general area that spring. And I had maybe seen 2 cases of ambrosia beetle, and there's all kinds of ambrosia beetles, but I'd only seen about 2 cases leading up to that in the previous decade.
Wow.
And so I saw 6 in one spring.
Okay.
And so then that's in 21. And then 22, we have severe drought. That lasts really, that entire year was pretty dry. We'd get just enough rain to keep severe fires in check, and then it fell out in the summer, and we had some pretty rough year. 2020, we set the record for heat in Walker County in 2022. And then in 2023, we turn around and we're in an equally severe or worse drought. And we broke the 2022 record and set it again. And so we stack up, severe snowstorm, drought in 3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, trees don't respond to that. They grow for a long time and they can die for a long time. And so they don't respond to that well. And so every event that occurs in this tree's life makes it less likely to be able to fight off insects and diseases. So take Ips beetle, for example. I'm seeing a lot of pine trees right now. I've got them in my own yard that have been attacked by Ips beetle, and our phones ring off the hook. My pine trees are dying. I've got a disease, and they're running rampant. They're gonna take out everything. And it's like, no, I get it. I see it every day. But most of them are things that these beetles are just gonna grab a few trees here and there, and they're gonna and they'll move on about their merry way. It's a natural insect, but we're seeing more of it because we've had these extreme events leading up to it. So it's occurring at a little bit of a higher rate than what it did, say, 10 years ago or 5 years ago. The same with hypoxylon canker in oak trees or hardwood trees. It's just more common. We're seeing trees that previously looked healthy, but they just couldn't make it through those, few severe years. And you can even factor in the previous 20 years of drought and stuff that all contributes to that tree's life.
Sure.
And so most of these things are natural insects. So I look at Ips and graver beetle as really just dealing the final blow to a pine tree, almost putting it out of its misery. If we walked outside into the woods right now, probably every pine tree in the woods is going to have one on it, or maybe not quite literally, but you get the idea. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But only under certain conditions is it going to be able to penetrate that tree and cause issues.
Okay.
The same as hypoxylon canker. I look at it almost like a staph infection on your skin. So if you cultured every tissue on my body, you'd find the staph bacteria in me.
Right.
Same as a tree. If we cultured every tissue of a tree, we're going to find fungal spores from hypoxylon canker. But only after we've experienced these extreme conditions, or it could be lightning strikes, or there's all kind of flooding, there's all kinds of other natural things. But then you couple that with extreme conditions, and it makes them even more likely to go. But hypoxylon would become toxic under those situations. So I would say I've seen a definite rise in forest health concerns from fungal infections to insects. Just because of weather conditions. That was a long road around to answer that question.
Yeah.
But
it needed that road. I mean, like you said, the super cold and then 2 summers of drought back to back. I mean, that's a lot of stress on the trees and that are around here. So both softwoods and hardwoods, right? So, Josh, you want to touch on the urban expansion?
So I think the main thing for urban expansion is get to know your neighbor. Yeah. Have relationships with your neighbor, right? Build that relationship so you can watch over each other's property, especially in this rural environment, right? Live on property and things like that. You want somebody overseeing your property if you're not there. You're a long way from town, right? So get to know your neighbor. The problems can be resolved through that. As far as if you're going to build a fence, call your neighbor. Right, it's the best way to do it. That's my recommendation for urban expansion.
Well, and I've got a little more to add on too that I thought about. And actually, your property, Chris, is what made me think of this. Is land management's going to look different because we don't have hundreds of acres. I mean, we still have it, right? Y'all sell it all the time, but
it's all split up.
Yeah, but we're dividing and dividing. And so I think land management is going to look a little different, to your point, Josh, knowing your neighbor. Of you're going to have to go in with a coalition.
Yep.
You know, you may have to harvest in conjunction
That's
with
right.
your neighbor. You may have to do a prescribed burn in conjunction with your neighbor.
Yeah.
So I think if you were impacted by the game preserve fire, you hired a consultant here in town, and that consultant went around and he met with all the people, and he really, you know, and he was able to get you a better rate because he could plant at a, you know, he, instead of working with just one landowner on a small area that was impacted by fire, you know, then he was able to go in and get, you know, 10 landowners that had substantial acreage and get better prices for everything.
Sure.
And then when, you know, 15 years from now, when those trees are grown up and ready to harvest, if he can negotiate that same thing, you're going to get better prices too, you know. And so I think the future of land management is really going to be a coalition of landowners. And it's important to know your neighbor and have you know, your consultant or your Forest Service person that has that relationship with them too, that can go and move forward. I would say that's the way to combat urbanization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were able to do a salvage of the timber that was left from the fire,
Yeah.
and I think the same logging company did multiple
Right.
tracks there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that was, you know, that was with, you know, Lone Star
Yeah.
being able to put those people together with
Yeah.
the logging service. So, yeah, that
I mean,
makes
it's-
total sense.
It boils down to those relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And building those relationships with neighbors.
Yeah.
Makes a difference for sure.
Very cool.
Well, Ben and Josh, thank you all for meeting with us today. It's been a pleasure to get to know you guys a little better, and have a little better understanding of what the Texas Forest Service can do for not only our clients but the general public as a whole. You know, we're thankful to have this service here in the state of Texas and here in Walker County, and put a link in the description for the A&M Forest Service website for people to go out and get more information on what all you all do and can help them with.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Yes. And stay tuned for the next episode of Grounded.